Hello, I'm John Amodio. I'm chairman of SCORE Staten Island. I want to welcome you today on behalf of Richmond County Savings Bank and SCORE Staten Island to Selling a Small Business and Succession Planning. In collaboration, this is being presented in collaboration with Doreen and Sarah CPA, and we are able to offer CPE and CE and CPE to attendees who have signed up for them. Go to slide 2, please.
Oh, friend, it's not going. How do I do it, friend? Oh, yeah. 1 second, John.
Okay. You find that your line will be muted. I ask that you please use a Q&A versus chat. Copies of the slides will be sent to all of the attendees. And please complete a brief survey that will be sent to you at the end of the webinar. If you are looking for CEs or CPE credits and have requested them, you must return a survey with 4 key words that will be given during the session. We at SCORE are mentors and we're here to help small businesses. At present, with the COVID pandemic, we are providing our services by phone, email, and virtually through Zoom. Today's presenter is Robert Scamardella, who started his legal career as assistant district attorney. In 1982, he started private practice and is currently the managing partner of Scamardella, Gervasi, Thomson, and Kasegrande, PC. He has numerous years of experience in estate, real estate, and business matters. He also has been a professor at Wagner College. I am pleased to present and introduce to you Robert J. Scamardella. Thank you, Bob, for being here with us today.
Thank you very much, John. It's a pleasure to be here. Doreen, I look forward to working with you today. And welcome to everyone who has joined us. Fundamentally, what this podcast was billed at is the sale of a business or succession planning. I prefer to describe the subject as transitioning a business. I mean, fundamentally, what we're going to talk about is moving from step A to step B. Step A being the equity ownership of the business being structured a certain way, to step B, that equity ownership being structured a different way. Obviously, a sale of a business is one of the primary ways in which we transition a business, but there are other ways, and we'll talk about that also as we go through this. But to understand the transitioning / sale of a business is important to understand the context in which a business sale would take place. And that context basically involves understanding first the business organization itself. There are different types of business organizations. Depending upon the type, that affects how, why, and when a business will be transitioned. So we'll talk a little bit about the different types of business organizations. Those of you here who own a business will be able to identify that type of business organization which they currently have. Your business will be under one of the types that we will discuss. Then I will dive into the whole business sale transitioning process. We'll talk about things to consider before that happens, things to consider while it's happening, and things to consider after it happens. The business sale aspect that we're going to talk about is really an arm's length transaction when a person sells his or her business to someone who they didn't know previously, puts it on the market and sells it. Another type of transitioning of a business that we're going to talk about is the succession transfer. That is, person A owns a business and transitions it to someone generally in their family who's going to succeed them in the operation of the business. Dad transfers the business to the two sons, dad transfers it to the two daughters, mom and dad transfer it to the daughter, some such type of arrangement, generally referred to as succession transfers or family succession transfers, and we'll talk about that. Third basic type of a business transition is the dissolution. You close it down. And there's more to dissolving the business than just putting the key in the door and walking away. And we'll talk about why you would dissolve a business and what's basically involved in that. If we have some time, I'm going to talk very basically about some retirement planning for business folks, and how that relates to this topic is as follows. You generally transition a business when you've put your time in, you are ready to retire, and you either sell or embark upon a succession plan of your business. And it would be good at that point in time to be in a position to have a retirement plan set up. But it's too late at that point to put a plan in place. These are the type of things you got to think of long before you transition your business and retire. All right, so let's talk about the different types of business organizations. I'm sure that any business folks out there, their business is organized one of these ways. And they are, as you can see on the next slide, the sole proprietorship, the general partnership, a limited partnership, a corporation, or a limited liability company. The five basic types of business organizations that we're going to discuss, have a general understanding of before we start talking about how to transition one of these business organizations. Now, what I've done to try and keep this topic rather simple, and this relates to a question many people have when they first form a business. What type of organization should I have? Should I be a partnership? Should I be a corporation? Should I be a limited liability company, etc.? And there are a lot of advantages, disadvantages, and complexities to each. But we try and simplify it here so that you have a basic understanding of the differences. What I've done here is I've put together a little chart. And if you take a look at the first column of the chart, it simply lists the different types of the entities, the sole proprietorship, etc. Across the top are really the main attributes of each of these entities. And then as we go through the chart, we talk a little bit about the differences. I'll walk us through the chart, not get into too much detail about each one, because that's not what this is about. Again, we're just going through this so we have a context for a discussion of the sale, but it's very useful information to understand not only the sale, but the nature and complexity of your business legal organization in any event. So let's take a look at the first characteristic of a business, and that is formation. All right. So if you're looking for a very simple way to form the business, I don't want lawyers, I don't want to spend any money in forming the thing, I want it as simple and as cheap as possible. I'm the only person going into the business, I'm going to be the sole owner. Well, then you want something called the sole proprietorship. Very simple to form. In fact, as a general proposition, you don't have to do anything to form it, generally. If you want to sell lemonade out in front of your home, you put up a little stand, you mix the lemonade in your kitchen, you go out there and you sell a glass of lemonade, you're in business. What are you? You are a sole proprietorship. Now, to say you don't have to do anything to form the business, that's true, but there might be certain regulations that you better conform to operate the business. But as far as formation is concerned, you don't have to do anything. Very simple. A general partnership, for purposes of formation, simply think of it as a sole proprietorship, but with two people. So we don't call it a sole proprietorship. We call it a general partnership. So formation is very simple. If you and your buddy Charlie want to open up that lemonade stand, you go out there and you do it. No need for a lawyer or anything else. Both of you are selling the lemonade. Well, you're what's called the general partnership. Now there's this thing called a limited partnership. We now need lawyers, all right? Basically, what a limited partnership is, very, very simple. It has two tiers of partners. It has one partner called the general partner and the other partner called limited partners. The general partner, as we'll see as we go through this, has management, control, and the limited partner's liability is limited, and therefore we have this two-tiered structure. To put this kind of structure in place, you need an attorney. There's certain documents have to be prepared, certain formalities have to be required. So we say the formation that is difficult / going to cost you something. Now we have this limited liability company, which some folks I'm sure are familiar with, where we have what we call members as owners. We'll talk a little bit more about the structure of it, but again, you need lawyers to form this type of entity, so we describe it as difficult when it comes, and expensive when it comes to formation. And then we have the old corporation, all right, where we have stockholders, officers, board of directors, etc. Again, need a lawyer, difficult to form. So we move now to the second attribute of these entities, and we talk about existence. How long do they last? Fundamentally is what we're talking about when we talk about existence. Now, if you're a sole proprietorship, you have that lemonade stand. Well, if you die, right, that business is over. From a legal perspective, it is over, right? So that even if you were to leave it to someone in your will or whatever, reforming it, reconstituting it, moving forward, those steps have to be taken. There are legal steps that would have to be taken. So the old business terminates on the death of the owner. Same thing with the general partnership. With respect to the limited partnership, it ends when the general partner, the one who has management control, dies. Now there's a legal rigmarole to try and continue this business. The old business legally has terminated. And that's not the case with limited liability companies and corporations. They have what's called perpetual existence, so that if the owners die, the business can still continue without any legal rigmarole. So if I owned a corporation, I'm the sole stockholder, and I left all of my stock to Doreen and Sarah, well, then the next day, Doreen just continues the business. No need to reconstitute anything. No need to open up new bank accounts. No need to do anything. No need. The business just continues. So limited liability companies and corporations have this advantage of perpetual existence. Transferability, right? This gets a little bit complicated, but I just want to give you the basics, right? It's kind of difficult to transfer a sole proprietorship because there is no entity that owns everything. There's an individual. So if I wanted to sell you my lemonade stand, which now grew to 42 lemonade stands all over Staten Island with 42 refrigerators and this, that, and the other, I got to transfer kind of each asset to you. There is no formal entity that I'm transferring. I'm just transferring the assets of this thing. And it holds true for a general partnership, which, as I said initially, is really just a sole proprietorship owned by two people. Limited partnership can be somewhat difficult to transfer because of the nature of it. But unlike limited liability companies and corporations, relatively easy to transfer an interest from a legal perspective. You see it with corporations when you buy General Motors stock and you want to sell it. There isn't much paperwork to sell it. And if I owned the lemonade stand and it was a corporation and I had a stock certificate that evidenced my ownership, I can transfer it to you by pretty much just endorsing the stock certificate over to you. And from a legal perspective, the transfer is complete. So the transferability of limited liability companies and corporations is legally relatively simple compared to the other three. Now, management, how are these things management? Sole proprietorship and general partnership, relatively straightforward. The sole proprietor owns his or her own business. The general partners own and manage their own businesses. I said before, limited partnership is this bit of a dichotomy. You have owners, one of which is the general partner. Then you have limited partners as owners. It's the general partner that manages the business, hires, fires, buys, sells, does things like that, controls the management. The limited partner's interest is limited in a variety of ways. One way is you have no say in management. With respect to a limited liability company, management is vested in the owners called the members, but they have all sorts of flexibility as to how they can manage it. They can have managing members. They can designate who they are. They could provide that the managing member is the second baseman of the New York Yankees. So as the second baseman changes, the managing member changes, or who has management changes. So there's a lot of flexibility in a limited liability company to determine who manages the company, how management could change, how there would be succession of management, and the like. Corporation is very formal with regard to its management structure. It has stockholders who are owners. Stockholders vote and elect a group of people called the board of directors. The board of directors really have management control, but what the board of directors generally do for day-to-day operations is elect officers who control the day-to-day operation. So the president would decide what secretary gets hired or fired, but the board of directors will decide whether we go out and borrow $1 million. But all of them are ultimately controlled by the stockholders who can vote the board of directors in or out. That's the management structure of a corporation. Lastly is, and it's important, is the liability aspects of the owners. With respect to a sole proprietorship and a general partnership, the owner in a sole proprietorship and the partners in a general partnership are fully liable for all partnership, obligations. So if I own that lemonade stand and somehow, some way, some arsenic gets in the lemonade and 6 people drink it and die, and they sue me, and they can, if they get a judgment, they can attach all of my assets, including my house, my bicycle, my cars, my everything. I'm individually liable for all of the business obligations. Same thing with the general partners. Both of the partners would be jointly and severally liable. If you're partners with someone and they own $12 and you own $2 million, and the partnership does something wrong and gets sued for $10 million, you could wind up having to pay the whole thing. You can't say, well, I'm only paying 50%, 50% my partner has to pay. No, as to the third party, you pay it all, then you go after your partner. Another dangerous aspect of general partnerships is this. Each partner is liable basically for the acts of the other partner. So if it was my partner who put arsenic in the lemonade instead of Tang, and made that mistake, I'm liable for his or her actions. Very dangerous way of doing business a general partnership is. Limited partnership, as I've said before, say it one more time, the general partner has management control and the general partner is the one who's liable for the obligations of the business organization. The limited partner's liability is only limited to their investment. So if you form a general partnership, you're the general partner, you ask me to invest, I put up $100,000 in that lemonade stand and you kill some people with arsenic, I'm just out my $100,000. The general partner would be on the hook for more than that. And then we get the limited liability in the corporations where the liability of the members in a limited liability company and the stockholders in a corporation is limited to their investment, all right? They cannot be sued personally for business obligations, or they're not liable for personally for business obligations. And that's why, as a general proposition, you see very, very many businesses organized as limited liability companies or corporations because of the very advantageous limitation of liability to those who invest in those businesses. So that's the background. That's the business organization structure. A lot of what we're going to say here relates to each and every one of those business organizations. There'll be some variations and we'll talk about them as we go through it. So let's talk first, before we delve into the procedure of the transfer itself, what are some of the reasons for transitioning a business or transferring a business? And there are basically two, right? One, you voluntarily want to change the equity structure of your business. And the second way is involuntarily, you may have to change the structure of your business. All right, we'll go through the both of them. The voluntary ones, I think, are rather self-evident, but let's just say it. You're not having much success in this business, and it just doesn't seem to be working for whatever reason, so you want to get out. Maybe working okay, maybe succeeding all right, but you get this job offer from another company that comes along that, for whatever reason, is more attractive, and you got to transition the business. Someone just may knock on your door and offer to buy your business out of the blue for a price that, as they say in The Godfather, you just can't refuse. And so there you go, transitioning. Sometimes you just desire to go in a different direction, right? This isn't for me. I always wanted to be a basketball coach, and I got an opportunity to coach a high school team, and that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to follow my muse. I got to transition my business. Of course, there are health concerns, which I put up here, but also talk a little bit about in the involuntary portion, but you could not be feeling too well, and your business could require a lot of effort, and you just can't do it anymore, and got to get out of that type of business. And the last one is the retirement. You've been doing it for 30 years, 40 years, whatever. It's time to enjoy the golden years, and so I'm ready to transition.
So Bob,
Yes.
I'm going to interrupt you.
Sure.
If you don't mind, we're going to do the first key word for
All
those
right.
that are here for CE and CP as well. The word is watch. WATCH. Please write that down. We will need the 4 key words with your survey. This is the first of the 4. It is watch. WATCH. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Doreen. Okay, so I need you all to watch as I continue here, all right? We just talked about health concerns and retirement with respect to the last reasons why you would voluntarily look to transition a business. Involuntary, okay? You want to keep going. You love it. You love getting up, going to the office, going to the store, going to whatever every day. But as they say, knock on wood, God forbid, you suffer a stroke. Well, you now become incapacitated and can't keep going in this business, and transitioning it becomes something that just has to be done. And or you die. It's going to happen to all of us, and if it happens to someone while they're operating a business, obviously transitioning must occur at that point in some manner, shape, or form. Before we move on, I just want to spend or make a couple of observations about involuntary business transitions. If you really stop and think about it, and you're in business, you kind of want to avoid an involuntary transition, right? I mean, it's people scrambling around, not you, because you're incompetent or you're dead, to transition and deal with and probably try and salvage the business. So that being said, it's a good idea. In fact, it's a very good idea. In fact, it's a no-brainer for anyone who's in business, has a viable business operation, to do some planning for the potentiality of an involuntary transfer. That is, we all like to believe that we're going to be fine and we're going to operate our business, and the day's going to come when we're going to retire and we're going to be competent and we're going to oversee the whole transitioning aspect of our business, and then we're going to enjoy our golden years thereafter. And that does happen, and that does happen frequently, but it doesn't happen always. And given the vagaries of life, we don't know if that's in the cards for us, or whether some sort of involuntary transition is what's going to happen. So planning is a good idea, and you can plan in a variety of ways to basically lay out from a legal perspective what would happen if you become incapacitated, and or what would happen to the business if you died. All right, so understanding now what some of the reasons for transition might be, took very basically now and move on about the types of business transfers. We've touched on this already. For the sake of orderly organization, let's just touch on it again. So you have an arm's length sale. You're ready to transition to business, or your successors are ready to transition to business. If it's involuntary, you're going to consider an arm's length sale. That means you're going to sell the business to someone you don't know, and negotiate the terms of it and transfer it to this other person or this other entity. Transaction among strangers, for want of a better term. Then there's this succession transfer. Right here, you're going to transition the business to somebody you know, probably your children or a family member, and this succession transfer thing could be something that you do while you're alive, or something that you could plan for, and it could happen upon your death, right? You could very simply provide for a succession plan in a last will if you wanted to. But there are other ways to do it upon your death also, or you set it up while you're alive, how the succession is going to take place. And we'll talk a little bit about that as we delve into each type. And the last type is dissolution, right? You've had it, it's over. You're going to go take that job coaching that high school basketball team because that's what you always wanted to do. Don't care about the cut and pay. You're doing what makes you happy. And for whatever reason, business isn't saleable, you're going to dissolve it. And we'll talk a little bit about how you do that. All right, so now we're up to the arm's length sale, which is, I think, the main billing of this this podcast, the sale of a business. So let's jump in. Here's where we're gonna approach it. We're gonna talk first about making a determination: is the business sellable, or how sellable is this business? Assuming we conclude that it is sellable, it has some value, we'll talk a little bit about how you determine the price of the business. Right? That would be the logical next step. All right, we know it's sellable. We have an idea of a price, or how we're going to approach. Or we have an idea of a price. We next talk about preparing for the sale. What should we be doing to prepare for the sale of a business? Not a unique consideration. You do things to prepare for the sale of a car. You probably, at the very least, wash it, wax it, and vacuum it, right? You do certain things to prepare for the sale of a house, like paint it. So you should consider doing certain things to prepare for the sale of a business, and we'll talk about those. Next, we talk about marketing the business. All right, we've determined it's sellable. We have an idea of a price. We've prepped for the sale. How do we go about finding a buyer? We'll talk a little bit about that. Well, we got our buyer. How do we negotiate the deal, the sale? What are some of the salient aspects or provisions in such an agreement? And we'll talk about that. Okay. Let's see. I tell me to keep track of the time here. Let me do that. All right, we're good. We may, depending upon how I'm able to get through this, we may take a little bit of a break, but we're doing pretty well so far. And by the way, they probably told you this, but we will. Doreen and I are here to take questions when we're done. All right, is the business saleable? Right. What are some of the things one looks at to determine that? Some are rather obvious. Is it making any money? And historically, has it been making money? When it comes to analyzing a lot of things with businesses, nothing is done on a one-year basis, right? I mean, something could fall out of the sky, bad for a business in one particular year or good for a business in one particular year. You usually look at a history or a multiple of years. So how has this business been doing over the last 3, 4, 5 years with regard to profit? The industry that the business is in, which way is that business or industry moving? Are we dealing with a business that makes buggy whips, or are we dealing with a business that makes air filtration systems for HVAC systems in buildings, right? I mean, there you got two businesses, well, one pretty much dead, and another one, who knows where that's going to go in the days of COVID. But important consideration in determining the salability of the business is the industry that it's in. The next thing is the condition of the assets and the inventory, if it's that type of a product business, of the business. And what do we mean by the assets? The assets are those tangible and intangible things that the business owns, all right? Could be as basic as the building, the machinery, the vehicles, the desks, the computers. Is this stuff any good? Does it have any value? What's the condition of these things? Another interesting aspect of the salability of a business, something that other astute purchasers look to, is the relationships that business has with its vendors slash suppliers, right? Is things only delivered to you on a cash basis? Not good from a salability perspective, all right? Are you a favored vendee of your vendors? Good, very good from a salability aspect. So if those relationships aren't good, that's not good. Of course, do you have a customer base? By we mean customer base, we talk about, repeat customers. Do you have them? How many do you have? How loyal are they? And what is the business's general reputation in the community? All important aspects in determining the salability of a business. Now, with businesses, the question is what you see, is that what you get, right? And that may or may not be the case. And most purchases don't go by with that which they just see, right? So they want to look at the books and records of the business. So the health of your balance sheet, how the financials look, have a lot to do with the salability of a business. And sometimes there's a disconnect between what the records show and what the owner thinks the viability or salability of the business is. But the business records are important. They will be looked at, and the healthier they are, the better. And lastly, is the question of how dependent is the business on the personality or the person of the owner. If Charlie's not there, is the business sellable? And it's usually an interesting question. Oftentimes, Charlie seems to think that, gee, if I'm not here, this thing has no value. And although he's very important, he may overstate his own importance and not realize that even without him, this business does have value. But those are the main aspects of determining the salability of a business. Let's assume that we've gone through them and determined that we're dealing with a business that, is saleable. And so now we have to determine the price. With respect to valuing business, and I don't do it, I'm not a business valuation expert, and there are folks who just do that, and that's what they do. They use different methods, and they use different methods when they value real estate. They use different methods when they value businesses, these so-called business appraisers. And this stuff can get, very, very complex. You could have your business, depending upon the nature of it, appraised, and they'll give you back a business appraisal this thick. But at the end of the day, in my considered opinion, the value of a business really boils down to two things. Again, it's not this simple, but maybe it is. And those two things are the assets of the business, that which the business owns, that which is going to now be owned by the new owners, right? And the income or the profit of the business, right? The health of those two things, the healthier those two things are, the higher the price is. The sicker those two things are, the lower the price is. And if you stop and think about it, the assets are somewhat easy to value, right? The furniture, the fixtures, the equipment. You might be able to come up with an idea of what they're worth and be somewhat close. You're dealing with real estate, etc. Some experts are required to help with that, but generally the assets of the business are easy to value, or at the very least easier to value than the business's future ability to make profit. That becomes a little bit more complex, and like I say, there are experts who are pretty darn good at it and can assist with that and come up with a value. If you look at value from a buyer's perspective, right? From a buyer's perspective, generally it really boils down to taking a look at the projected profit or income of the business as a return on my investment in buying a business. I mean, if a business is throwing off $50,000 a year and the seller wants $1 million for the business, that's a 5% return, right? If I am getting 8%, 9% return somewhere else, I'm not going to take that $1 million and buy that business. It just doesn't make sense. If on the other hand, it's a 10% return or a 15% return, then the price becomes more attractive to a buyer. So when you value your business, right, you're sitting there thinking about, my business throws off X amount of dollars. I want Y dollars. Well, what percent return is that? And you'll be able to have some feel for how many purchases will be out there willing to give you the kind of money you think that your business is worth. All right. At the end of the day, there are folks out there whose living is to value businesses and can assist you in coming up with at least a listing sales price for your business. All right, so we've determined our business is saleable. We've established a price. Before we put it on the market, we would be well advised to prepare. To otherwise prepare. And so what are some of the steps that you should take to prepare for the sale? Well, if there are any problems, right, that the business is dealing with, try and clean up those problems before you put the business on the market. Not too many people are anxious to buy problems, right, to pay for a problem. What do I mean by problems? Well, if there's some debt hanging around, if there are some, building department violations or things like that, if there's a lawsuit a pending lawsuit, if there are outstanding claims, people making certain claims against the business, things like this, that good, solid businesses could have to deal with. Before you put it on the market, try and clean that up as best you can. The least amount of these things that you have when you're going to sell, the better off you are. I don't advise trying to hide these things from a buyer. The odds are a good buyer or good legal counsel will find out about them. And even if they don't, and they find out about them after the fact, you want to sell your business clean. You want to walk away. You don't want to be subject to some sort of misrepresentation or fraud litigation after you sold. So clean up the problems, because you're probably going to have to disclose them if you don't. all businesses have accounts receivable. You should look to clean them up as best you can before you put the business on the market. A business carrying accounts receivable a year old, a year and a half old, whatever, just doesn't look good. Doesn't look like your customer base pays you. So you want to clean that up, and you want to show as best you can that your accounts receivable are readily collectible. For sure, it's something that an astute buyer is going to look at and study, and you want it to look as good as it possibly can. I talked before about the importance of the financial statements. Doreen can weigh in on this later. Good, clean financial records go a long way in easing the sale of a business. They will be looked at. They will be examined. They will be studied. The more accurate and clean they are, the better. Your assets. This is the physical part. I talked before about you selling a car, you wash it, you wax it. You're selling a house, you paint it, you power wash the front sidewalk. Well, same thing with your business, right? You get your assets in good shape from a physical perspective. Just clean it all up and make it look like it's make it presentable. Kind of obvious, but not done all the time. If you're in a product business and you got inventory that hasn't been sold, it's well beyond its shelf life, get it the heck out of there. It just reflects bad on the viability of a business if it's got this old non-sellable inventory. Get rid of it, clean it up. Something good to have when you're going to sell a business is testimonials from your customers and or suppliers. If I'm buying your business and you get basically recommendations, right? You got good recommendations from customers. That's persuasive. And the same thing with those people I would rely on when I'm in this business, my suppliers and my vendors. They speak highly of you. That's a good thing. And to the extent that you can get testimonials from them and have them maybe in a little folder for purchases, that's a good thing. Now we'll talk a little bit about the problem with getting that, even if you have vendors and customers willing to give them, and that has to do with the confidentiality aspects. When you're looking to sell a business, you just sometimes don't want everybody to know that you're in the process of selling. We'll talk about that in a second, but all things being equal, testimonials from customers and suppliers are a good thing to present to buyers, all right? When we talked about valuing the business, which you've already done, what's a good idea to do is not to go into the sale in terms of preparing for it with the sales price, but in your mind, the range, right? The range, the most you could hope for the business and the least amount that you will accept. What is that bottom line number? No one has to know it but you should know it. You should know it and not let it evolve during the process. Going in, if I get this number, then I'm going to move this business. The other thing that you have to think about is what are you going to do from a purchase of financing perspective? What that means is this: it's very rare that a business is sold on a all cash basis. That is, you're looking to sell your business for $500,000. You're going to look long and hard to find someone who's going to say, here's $500,000, I will buy your business. Generally, the way these transactions are structured is in some sort of down payment installment sale type of arrangement. I'll give you $300,000 and I'll pay you the $200,000 over a period of time in installments. And so what you got to give some thought to is, what type of cash is the minimum type of cash that I'm going to want? How much of the price am I willing to finance? You would be the lender. You would hold the paper, so to speak. And on that financing amount, what kind of interest rate do I want, right? So I'm selling my business for $500,000. I got to get $200,000 cash. I'll carry $300,000 at 6%, and I'll carry it over 5 years, 3 years, 8 years, 10 years, whatever it might be. And then the other aspect of that is, what are you going to want for security for that debt? I mean, if the buyer doesn't pay it, what collateral or security do you have? At the very least, your lawyer will suggest to you that you have the business as collateral. If he doesn't make the payment, you get the business back. That might be sufficient for you. If he gives me $200,000, pays me $100,000, and doesn't pay me the other $200,000, and I get the business back, that might not be such a bad deal for me. On the other hand, you may be retiring, moving to Arizona, and that's not going to work for me. And I need more security than just the business. So maybe the buyer has to give me a mortgage on his personal residence too, or some such thing. But you should give this some thought before you put it on the market. What are the parameters that you need, at the very least, with respect to the cash that you take and what you would finance? The last thing to think about is this confidentiality aspect. I talked about it a little bit when I talked about testimonials. Maybe I can get a slew of testimonials, but I don't want them because I don't want my customers to know I'm selling, right? And my concern might be that if they know, they go to somebody else, and that hurts my sales price and everything else. Same thing with my employees. I don't want my employees know that I'm selling. So that testimonials might not be in place, but you got to give this whole confidentiality aspect some thought. Not going to be possible to keep it completely confidential, obviously, right? If you're the only one who knows you're selling your business, you won't sell it because you got to let some buyers know. But there are ways to keep it as confidential as some reasonable limits on confidentiality that you can put in place. But again, that's all going to be related to how we market the business. If we market it by advertising it in the Staten Island Advance, confidentiality goes right out the window. So that's a nice little segue into how we market the business after we've determined its saleability, established a price, and prepped it for sale. Well, in marketing a business, one of the first things to think about is whether or not a buyer is right under your nose, right? You may have an employee, loyal employee, someone who's been around for a long time, who can really make a go with this business and do very well at it, who you like, who you trust. And you may want to sit down and talk to them about it. Interestingly, you may know that this person's hardworking, this person will make a go of it, and be more inclined to take less cash and finance more because you know the person, right? So you may be able to make a transaction more attractable for someone like that than you would for someone who you don't even know, and making it more attractive might be in his interest or her interest and your interest. So think about that first. Is there someone under your nose who may be interested in the business? And that transcends an employee, maybe a customer, someone who you've been selling to and dealing with, who has a passion for what it is that you do. You consider folks like that as potential purchasers. You may know other businesses, not necessarily your business. Do we have a word, Doreen?
Yes.
Go ahead.
You're getting it. So we all have to work together when we try to sell our business, right?
That's right.
Together. That's your second word. There will be 2 more words before the end of this presentation, 2-hour presentation. We'll have Q&A at the end. The word is together. And then Bob, you let us know about the break time. It is coming into 10
Yes,
minutes.
yeah, almost it's a little bit 7 or 8 minutes before 12. So what I'll do is I'll just finish this marketing of the business, and then we'll take a little break and pick it up at there.
Sounds good.
Sound good, Doreen?
Okay, last time together. Thank
Okay.
you.
All right. So together, let's finish this aspect of this little podcast, and then we'll take a few minute break. All right, so we're talking about marketing the business, right? Selling it. Think about folks who may be under your nose, who may be prospective buyers, and who, because you know them, you know what they're made of, you know their qualifications, you know their abilities, you may be able to structure a deal that would be better for them than it would be for a third party, and that could inure to your benefit too. So sort of a win-win situation. I'm moving along now. We talked about employees and customers. Well, there may be another business. Not your type of business, but another business that's somewhat related to yours that may be interested in taking over your type of business. Maybe not, but this happens a lot in the business world, so it's something for you to think about. Of course, depending upon the nature of your business, this may or may not be applicable, but it's something on the list to check when you're thinking about marketing your business. The next approach would be to competitors, right? You own the business. You've been in competition with any number of folks. Let's take a Staten Island business. You know them. They know you. Be nice if you can, for a variety of reasons, if you can work a deal with a competitor. Again, could be a win-win situation. Win for you in the sense that he or she knows your business pretty well, knows the value of it, would be willing to pay what it's worth, which is what all you should be willing to get. Usually, if a competitor is willing to buy your business, they're financially secure, so that to the extent you finance it, the financing will probably be fairly secure or more secure than it might be otherwise. So there are a lot of advantages to selling to a competitor. From the competitor's perspective, the competitor, A, not only purchases a business that's making some money and improves their bottom line, but they have one less competitor, which over time could further inure to their benefit. So think about marketing the business to competitors. But if there's no one under your nose, no employees, no customers, no non-related businesses, no competitors who are interested in buying your business, then you're going to pretty much probably be going out to the general public. And one of the best ways of selling anything, frankly, and I'm not a broker, when you go out to the general broker, is to get a good, reputable broker. Let me talk about brokers for a second. Brokers, like lawyers, don't have the best of reputations in the communities, but brokers perform valuable services, and good ethical brokers are to be admired and are to be used. I mean, fundamentally, what is a broker, right? A broker is a person who brings buyers and sellers together. That's what a broker is. You have stock brokers, you have real estate brokers, you have business brokers, right? So there are folks out there whose job it is and who are experienced in representing sellers of businesses and finding buyers for that business. So at the end of the day, the hiring of a broker is an advisable thing to do when you're marketing a business, if you've explored the other methods and they don't work. Just to relate this before we take the break to the confidentiality aspects, obviously, if you sell in a manner in which you don't go out to the general public, you don't hire a broker, maintaining confidentiality is much easier to attain. Once you go to a broker, it becomes more difficult. The brokers start listing this thing multiply, etc. Then it pretty much becomes generally known. But brokers can by virtue of their own experience and by virtue of connections and networks that they have, may be able to find you a buyer and still keep a little bit of a lid on the confidentiality aspect. All right. So we've taken care of some background. We've delved into the sale of a business. We've got to the point where we've prepared, got a price, we've marketed our business, and we've found a buyer. Right? What happens after we found the buyer? We'll talk about that right after we take, I guess, Doreen, what's it, a 3 or 4 minute break, or John?
We'll take a 5-minute break.
5-minute break. All right.
Okay, we're ready to get started again. So everyone, please, Bob, thank you so far for everything that you've done. It's been very interesting to me, and I'm sure to many already. If you could continue, and then we'll have time for questions and answers at the end. Okay?
Sure.
Take care.
All right, John, thank you. Yeah, before I move into this next aspect, I was made aware during the break of a question that I think was a good one, probably something I should have covered under the confidentiality aspects of this. And that is the use of so-called non-disclosure agreements, right? If you're selling your business and a buyer is interested in it and they want to look at your financials and things along those lines, what's normally done in that situation, you turn this stuff over, which, it's highly confidential, but you get the buyer to sign something called a non-disclosure agreement whereby he or she agrees that they will keep this information confidential, and if they don't, you have legal recourse against them. So they better. So it's a good question, and yes, to enhance the confidentiality of those things that are generally disclosed when you sell a business, it's a good idea to make use of non-disclosure agreements. Absolutely. All right. So getting back to the basic train here that we've been following, we just concluded before the break marketing the business. We've marketed it. We found a buyer, or at least someone who's very, very interested in buying it, and the time has now come to negotiate the deal. So what's involved in negotiating and putting together a transaction or contract for the sale of a business? First thing I would note is that you should be prepared for some give and take. I don't think I'm telling you anything that you don't already know. Folks out there may not have sold a business, but you've sold a lot of things. And human nature being what it is, if you ask for $1, very rarely does a person say, okay, I'll pay $1. They'll pay 90 cents, and there's give and take, not only on the price, but on other terms. So be prepared for that when you begin negotiating the deal after you found the prospective buyer. One of the main aspects of the give and take, aside from the price, right? The price is always there, is going to be this structure of the payment. I spoke about it before, just talk a little bit about it now again, and that is what part of the price is going to be paid in cash, what part is going to be paid in installments, that is what part of it's going to be a loan by you, the seller, excuse me, to the buyer. What's the interest rate going to be? What's the term of that loan going to be? And what's the security going to be, if anything, beyond the business itself? As I said, when you're preparing for the deal, you should kind of know what your parameters are in this respect when the buyer comes to you with his or her proposal. All right. Also, in negotiating the deal, very, very important for you to investigate and know the qualifications of the buyer. If you're selling your business for $1 million and someone walks up to you and says, I will pay you $1 million for that business, but I will put down 100,000 and 900,000 of it's going to be financed. You might want to know what this person previously did for a living, what type of assets this person has. Does this person owe anybody else any money? If the person who offered you this owns nothing, has $300,000 in credit cards, knows nothing about your business, but is offering you the listing price you walk away from that deal because you just don't have a buyer with the qualifications to do it, right? That's a black and white type of example. You could be in a gray area, but you want to know, the point is you want to know the qualifications of your buyer. You just don't want to know what he or she is offering. You want to know what he or she is all about. From a financial perspective, particularly if it's an installment sale, which it probably will be. If it's an all cash deal, you don't much care about that one, right? And then also from an expertise and management perspective, does this person have the expertise to operate your business? If he or she doesn't, and it's an installment sale, I mean, you're kind of asking for trouble here, right? You're kind of telling yourself this person don't know how to operate this business, so they're probably not going to be successful at it. And if they're not successful at it, they're not going to pay you. So buyer qualifications from a financial and expertise perspective, very important to know. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to look into it. Something else you got to know about business sales, a very essential component of it, is this thing called non-competition agreements. That is, the buyer is going to want you to stay out of this business. You can't sell your restaurant to me and open up a new restaurant 3 blocks away under a different name. The reason why you're not going to be able to do that is because the buyer is probably going to insist upon a non-competition provision in the sales agreement. That is, you're going to agree that you will not engage in this type of business for a certain period of time in a certain geographic location, right? Generally not a problem. You're out of this business, that's it. So you'll sign a non-compete agreement. Sometimes it's a bit problematical, particularly if you're moving, but you're going to stay in that business. But it's going to be something that's going to have to be negotiated. That is, you will not compete for how long and in what geographic location. Oftentimes in a business, you don't just walk away. You just don't sell it and say goodbye, good luck, and good night. The buyer wants you to hang around and operate, or at least, the very least, give consultative advice to the new entity for a certain period of time. So you're going to stay for how long? While you're staying, exactly what are your responsibilities? And what, if anything, do you get paid for doing that? Right? Probably going to be part of a deal for a lot of businesses. Not all, but a lot. Something for you to consider whether you think that's going to be what's going to happen in your business, that you're going to have to stay around. And if so, what are your parameters with respect to that? And there are a slew of other contractual terms. I'll just touch on some, but it's a practical matter. You're well advised not to enter into the sale of a business without legal advice, right, from an experienced lawyer. But some of those other terms are, we talked about the down payment, employees, right? The buyer may want assurance that some of the employees are staying, and that may have to be worked out. I mean, if you go and all the employees go, I don't want to pay this kind of money for the money, but if I know you're going to stay around and help me for a year or two, and so and so and so and so, or integral to the business are going to stay, I like it, right? And that may have to be worked out. Claims, there may be, you may not have been able to clean everything up. There may be some claims against the business. Well, how are they going to be handled? Accounts receivable, all right? We were closing on November 15th. On November 15th, there's $112,000 in outstanding accounts receivable. Well, whose money is that? Does that go to the seller, or does the buyer get to keep that money? And if it goes to the seller, does the buyer collect it and then pay the seller? How's it collected, right? I put down audits, but it really deals with creditors. You got to make sure that, or the buyer is going to want to make sure that there are no creditors of this business that are going to come after me after I buy it. So that's got to be nailed down and cut off. And if there's a tax audit for a year in which you own the business and I bought the business, not just its assets, I don't want to pay these taxes for 2 years before I bought the business, and there's going to be provisions to protect the buyer against things like that. There's guarantees, right? In other words, if it's an installment sale and the buyer buys the business in a new corporation, right? A new corporation buys your business. Well, you might want a personal guarantee from the real buyer, the individual, so that if he or she doesn't make the installment payments, you not only get the business back, but you can go after their personal assets, right? If they gave you a personal guarantee. And there may be contracts that the business is liable for. Maintenance contracts on equipment, they got to be disclosed. The buyer's got to understand you're taking over those contracts. You have to fulfill them, etc. So there are all these other aspects of the sale of the business that got to be tied up, these sort of loose end type things. But from your perspective, as the individual, as I said, for a lot of this stuff, you're just going to need legal counsel. You're not even going to think about it. You're not going to know how to handle it. But for the sales price, looking into the buyer's qualifications, how much installment, how much is going to be cash, what are you going to do from a non-compete perspective? Are you going to give management assistance? You yourself can think about that stuff and know where you're going to fall in the negotiations. And then, you get legal counsel to help you wade through those a little bit, but to also help you think about those things that you didn't think about. All right? So you've negotiated the deal, you've closed it, and hopefully it's in a retirement situation, and you go on to live happily ever after, and the buyer pays you everything that you're owed. Just before I move into the next type of transfer, what we're going to discuss, just to close out on the sales situation, what happens if you don't get paid? Let's talk about it very, very briefly. A lot's going to depend upon what was the agreement, right? What kind of security do you have? Did the buyer personally guarantee the obligation? Were you sure to, at the very least, secure the obligation with the business itself? So if all you've done is secure the obligation with the business, well, then you got to take some legal steps to get the business back. May be good, may not be good. Generally speaking, if the buyer hasn't paid you, he or she ran the business down to something that's not worth what it was when you sold it, and the question is going to be, if you take it back, can you build it back up? Or do you have some recourse vis-a-vis other security, either personally against the buyer, that is, you could sue the buyer personally and go after his or her personal assets, or maybe even have security against some other assets, like a mortgage on the buyer's home, which you may have to foreclose or threaten to foreclose in order to get your money. Messy stuff, maybe recourse for you to get the money, but the better practice is to structure a deal up front whereby you're fairly, very secure that you're going to get paid whatever portion is an installment sale and not have to deal with any sort of collection aspects. All right, so that's the sale of a business in an arm's length transaction to a third party, which was the meats and potatoes of this podcast. But we also want to talk about a succession transfer. You're not selling to a third party. Doreen, do we have?
Yes, we have the third word, and it's appropriate here. You have to make a plan, P-L-A-N, plan, when you do your succession transfers. Okay, so the third word is plan, and we're going to have one more after that, probably during the Q&A, I would guess. Thank you.
Thank you, Doreen. And she's right. Succession transfers is all about plans, all right? So here, the difference between a succession transfer and the arm's length transfer is you're dealing with somebody you know, right? And I'm going to deal with this in the context of a family member, right? Could be employee, could be generally employee or a family member, but we'll talk about it in the context of a family member. So you got a generational type business, right? You got the parents want to pass the business on to, like I say, the sons or the daughters. Now, in doing that, you're really just looking to identify, right, which of the family members, which of the kids are going to take over the business. And you're not going to pull them out of some other business that they're in and bring them over. Generally, you're going to get them involved in the business. You're going to train them as a successor. So identify and train would be the first obvious steps in a succession plan. Now, the plan could be put in place during your lifetime, generally better, or the plan could be put in place upon your death. Either way, though, it is a plan, all right? You decide how it's going to go down and who is going to be involved. You can do that upon your death. You could say, my son, Robert's going to take over the business. Here's what he's going to pay. Here's how he's going to pay. Here's the way the thing is going to work out, right? And you could put documents in place through a will or trusts or other type documents to have that plan operational upon your death. Or you can come up with a plan and put it in place while you are still alive, right? Advantages to doing it during your lifetime, generally from a tax perspective, right? And there are other good reasons why you'd want to do it during your lifetime, not the least of which is that you can get the hell out of there and enjoy life a little bit. From a death perspective, there are advantages to doing it upon your death. You're not alive to see any mistakes. You could make a lifetime transfer and regret it. Why the hell did I do that? Because who knew that my son was going to have all of these creditors who were going to come in and lien the business or whatever, or my son was going to get divorced and my business is involved in this divorce. Doreen? Okay. So there are advantages and disadvantages to doing this succession plan and putting the succession plan in place during your lifetime upon your death. If you do no planning, and this gets back to what I talked about earlier, when you die, there will be a transitioning of that business. You're dead. You don't own it anymore. Somebody else is going to own that business, or something is going to happen to that business. The only difference is you don't know who, what, when, where, or why, because you did not take advantage of your ability to plan for it.
So Bob, I just wanted to interject a second.
Sure.
That's
Sure.
okay?
Sure.
I just wanted to remind those who are the tax practitioners on the line that when it's during the lifetime, they have to worry about the related party transactions, for tax purposes.
Mm-hmm.
So there's limitations with that.
Mm-hmm.
IRS will disallow losses. They will recharacterize capital gains to ordinary gains. And it affects certain depreciation calculations, and there's limitations on like-kind exchanges. So that's, I think, a major difference between during life and closely held and family related parties, which IRS has a list of 13 related parties if we want to talk about that in the Q&A. Just thought that was appropriate at the time. Thank you.
It very is, Doreen, and you're the expert in that, and I'm sure there may be some questions, and you can handle it. But in basic terms, what Doreen is saying is that when you have transactions between interfamily members, the IRS takes a close look at those transactions because they think there may be a little fugaziness going on. In other words, if I have a business worth $20 million, and if I die owning that business, I may have to pay a lot of inheritance tax because it's $20 million. Well, before I die, I'll sell it to my son, Charlie, for $1 million. And therefore, we won't have to pay any tax. Well, the IRS looks at that and says, look, this wasn't an arm's length transaction. You fudged on the sales price. We're auditing this, and you got to pay. And Doreen is quite rightly pointing out that there are other aspects to interfamily transactions that you got to be careful from a tax perspective because the IRS is going to take a look at it. And there could be problems. Thank you very much for that, Doreen. Very, very true. All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the lifetime transfer part. And right up on top is the first bullet point that Doreen pointed out. There are tax considerations that you have to look at, and there are income tax considerations. A lot to do with your basis in the property and what a gains tax would be as opposed to transferring it between lifetime and death, estate, or gift taxes. If you're dealing with family members, you have to be attuned to, and that's one of the things Doreen was talking about. You know, you can't fudge the price. Got to be very, very careful when you're transferring to family members from a tax perspective. Right? Another aspect of this thing is that whatever you do with succession planning, it should be coordinated with an overall estate plan. You have 4 children. 1 or 2 of them are going into the business. The business is the main asset of your estate. What about the other children? All right, are they being shortchanged? Aren't they being shortchanged? Is there ways in which I can give the business to the 2, but yet treat the other 2 somewhat equally? And there are things that can be done to get over concerns that you might have about treating everybody fairly, if you will. So you got to coordinate the succession of the business plan with your overall estate plan. You should know, even during a lifetime transfer, there are ways in which you can transfer a business or most of the value of the business, yet retain management of the business, right? I mean, the money could pretty much flow to the kids, but the decisions could be made by you. Possible to do that. Sometimes people do it the other way, believe it or not. They give the management to the children and they keep the money for whatever reason, and there are tax advantages to doing it that way. But basically what happens, and I don't want to get into too much of the tax aspects, is that you create different categories of interest, right? Different rights, not like one person owning everything. Management rights over here, voting rights over here, rights to income over here, and that affects the valuations and the tax aspects. Stuff gets very complicated, but I just listed here to advise you that these types of things are possible, and I highlight it by talking about management. I don't want to give my business to the children because they're not ready to really run it. I don't care about the money, but I care about running it. Okay, you can do it, and you can keep the management, give them the money, so to speak, and still come up with a plan that works for tax purposes and other reasons, all right? There's also a concern in the succession plan that, well, I'm going to give it to 2 kids, 3 kids. Well, how do I know they're not going to fight? How do I know they're not going to get along? How do I know one of them won't want to get out of the business? Suppose one of them gets divorced. You can require that the 3 of them execute a operating agreement, limited liability company, a stockholders agreement, or a partnership agreement that controls all of those things. I will give you 3 the business, but this is the agreement you 3 are going to have to sign as between yourselves, because I don't want there to be problems after the fact. I want you to plan for those problems now by signing this agreement. So you can think a step further down the line also. And then your payout, right? You're transitioning. What income do you need? What don't you need? There are all sorts of ways in which this succession plan can be structured financially. You could make it all a gift to your children. Give it to them for nothing, all right? There are tax consequences to that, but we look at it. Might be the better way to do it. We could sell it to them, value it fully, sell it to them, installment sale. They don't have to come up with any cash, right? They pay me X amount of dollars over a certain number of years, but they own it. It's done. It's over. Or you can do part gift, part sale. I'm going to, it's worth $5 million. $2 million is going to be a gift. They're going to pay out $3 million to me. And people like Doreen and others will analyze the tax aspects of that and let you know that it works. You could have a sale of the business and have part of the agreement be, say, some sort of a consultation agreement where you remain as a consultant and get a salary. You can do that in a lifetime transfer. You can do that even in business transfers. There are income tax aspects to that that you'd have to look at. But the point here is this. If you're making a transfer to children, right, taking over the business, not only are there things you can do with management, but there are things you can do with the payout to you. Has tax consequences depending upon what you do, but there is some flexibility to be had to meet the needs of an individual family. All right, that's the basic function of a lifetime succession plan. then, like, as I said, you can have a plan, and you can do it upon your death. You can do it by last will or revocable trust if it's being done upon death. Sometimes people, well, oftentimes people transfer business interests through irrevocable trusts, but they're used in lifetime transfers, right? So you're going to either have a will or revocable trust. It's going to provide what happens to your interest in that business upon your death. Again, there are tax considerations that you have to go over with someone like Doreen, bring in your tax person to coordinate with your attorney and putting the plan together. And it should also coordinate, again, with your overall plan. Upon my death, I'm leaving the business to 2 children. Well, what about the other 2, the other 3, etc.? It should be comprehensive. Just don't put together a business succession plan without looking at your entire estate plan, and make sure that business succession plan dovetails nicely with the rest of your plan. Right? So that's a succession transfer, right? Remember, we were talking about transitioning a business through sale first, succession second. We've covered both of those. Now we'll talk about the third way and final way to transition a business, and that's through dissolution, all right? Now, dissolution is a legal word which means not the end of a business. It basically means the ending of a business. Dissolving a business is a process. It's a process by which we close a business. And we're going to talk about some of the reasons why you would dissolve and what is the basic dissolution procedure. Kind of obvious, right? Reasons to close a business: not making any money, working like a dog, doesn't make any sense, right? You're eking out a living, but the business is in decline. It's going the wrong way. Over time, it's just going to get worse and worse. It's a business. You're making money, making a living. You know, it's okay, but it's all you. You know it's all you. And if you're not going to be operating, you're not going to be there. The business has no value. And therefore, it's just a matter of dissolution and not sale. Too personally dependent upon you. So what's the procedure for dissolution, the procedure to close a business, right? Well, you liquidate all your assets. You got phones, you got computers, you may have vehicles, whatever it is that you have, you sell. So there's some money to be realized on dissolution, or another word is liquidation of a business, right? You liquidate your assets, and you might make some money in dissolution. It just doesn't mean put the key in the door and walk away and you make nothing. Sometimes I've been involved in business dissolutions where owners walked away with considerable sums based upon the fact that business had a lot of value in its assets. You got to cancel all your permits and licenses, right? You just don't want those things lying around after the fact. Before you actually conclude dissolution, be done with them, because closing them out later on when you continue to get the letters could be a problem. You want to resolve, not necessarily pay. You want to resolve your outstanding debts. And the reason why I say not necessarily pay is because depending upon the nature of the obligation, you may not have to pay, right? Maybe a corporate obligation, you're dissolving the corporation. There may be some claim that the debtor has as against the assets, but not as against you. The asset sales are sufficient to cover the debt. You might not have to pay the debt, but you should resolve the debts one way or another. Got any outstanding accounts receivable? And that's really, in effect, liquidating assets, because your accounts receivable are an asset, although it's an intangible one. Before you fully dissolve, you want to make sure that you've collected all your accounts receivable. And lastly, you should conclude the dissolution process according to certain legal formalities. There's some paperwork that should be prepared and filed that shows this business no longer exists. Generally not an expensive proposition, but you should do it. And I'm sure Doreen would say, and those of you out there who are accountants know, you also finalize your returns, filing your last returns, and close that out. I probably should put that in the parentheses under cancel permits, licenses, parentheses, file final returns. And it's a good idea to maintain the records of this business for at least 7 years after the dissolution process is complete. One more topic, but before that, I think Doreen.
No, I'm going to hold off on the key word. I will have a PowerPoint that will go with yours that will talk about closing your EIN and all that.
Good,
You don't
good,
have to
okay.
worry about that, okay?
All right, good. So
I'll come back with the words after this.
Okay, so this is the last little thing I just wanted to talk about. We've taken care of the business aspects, and I just wanted to just throw in retirement planning because, as I said, it relates to the retirement situation, right? You've been in your business for 40 years, you're ready to retire. It'd be a good idea if you had years before putting in some sort of retirement plan in place so that you have an additional income other than whatever the sales price was that you were able to get on the sale of your business. And so when it comes to retirement planning, all I'm going to talk about is what are some of the basic advantages of having a plan and some of the just very basic plan types, just so you have some idea of it. This itself is a complicated topic that could take, at the very least, a full podcast, but I mention it again because when it comes time to retire, it's good that you had a retirement plan in place. Okay, the advantages of a retirement plan is retirement planning is really an extraordinary good way to accumulate wealth without tax implications, really, and that's what boosts it, right? If you're an employer, right, and you contribute to any employee or any retirement plan, those contributions are tax deductible to the employer, right? Oh, I'm sorry. So if you're the employer and you contribute to your own plan, right, you're getting a tax deduction as the employer into your plan, and then as you're going to see, the plan itself provides all sorts of tax advantages, right? And well, let me talk about that now. So the money goes into your plan, either from your employer or from you. We just noted that it comes from the employer, it's tax deductible to the employer. If it comes from you, if you realize, let's say $10,000 worth of income, you can keep it and pay tax on it. Or you can put it into your retirement plan. You put it into your retirement plan, you don't pay tax on it. So where you might have netted $6,000 after taxes, you now have $10,000 sitting in a retirement plan earning income. So that $4,000 is not gone, it's working for you. You will pay tax someday when you withdraw it after you, presumably after you retire, but think of all of the wealth that untaxed money has accumulated for you while it was in that plan. And that's really the last bullet point here. When you do get taxed, generally you're in a lower tax bracket. So when you do pay tax, you actually pay less than you would have if you kept the money initially. And the dividends and the interest that you earn on that money that you did not pay tax on is also tax deferred until you withdraw it when you retire. It's a nifty way to accumulate wealth, as I say. Last thing, some of the basic types of plans, they run from very simple to what we call a SEP, simplified employee pension plan, in which an employer basically puts money into an IRA for a employee. There are plans that are called match plans. The employer contributes a certain amount to match what the employee puts in, or you'd say for every dollar that the employee puts in, the employer will put in 50 cents. And these things, again, are good ways to compensate employees, help attract employees, help to keep employees, and also there are some tax benefits. And of course, the employer, as an individual, may be able to participate in the plan himself or herself. They have these next two basic types of plan called defined contribution and defined benefit. And this is the big bugaboo going on today. Let me talk first about defined benefit, then go back to defined contribution. A defined benefit plan, you see nowadays, not too much in the private sector, but in municipal pension plans. You become a New York City fireman, New York City police officer. There is a defined benefit. You will get a certain defined benefit when you retire at a certain age. You'll get a certain amount a month pursuant to a fixed formula. It's a defined benefit. If the city don't have the money, they better find it, all right? If you have a defined benefit plan from a private employer doesn't have the money in that plan, they gotta get it. It's a contractual benefit to you. It's a defined benefit, right? And that's to be juxtaposed against this thing called the defined contribution plan. Well, what does that mean? The employer is not guaranteeing any definite benefit at the end, right? What it's being guaranteed is a contribution, right? We will contribute X into your pension plan, right? Which is generally a 401k or a profit sharing plan or the like, right? Whatever is in that plan, based upon the contributions over the years, that's what you get from when you retire, right? The benefit is not defined. The contribution is what's defined, and the benefit will result from whatever the contributions are over the years. And just one other, general aspect of this: if you establish one of these plans for your business, the contributions don't necessarily have to be obligatory. There are plans in which you have the ability to determine on a yearly basis whether you're going to make a contribution into that plan. It's all got to be part of the plan. It's got to be specified what those factors are that would require a contribution, but it's not mandatory that you make a contribution every year. So there is some flexibility in that regard. Complicated stuff. Going to need to consult with an expert to put a plan like this in place, but definitely something that you should consider, particularly if there's a ways to go to retirement. All right, so that's it on the basics of retirement plan. And Doreen, that's basically it for what I have to present here. I don't know how you want to take it from here, but I'm ready for questions.
With the segue of profit sharing plans, there was a question or questions about the employee stock ownership plan, or ESOP, and how to utilize that in a transition. But my understanding is that your employees are involved in that. And if you have other commonly controlled companies, those also can be part of that situation. That's something.
I'm going to be very honest with you, Doreen. I'm going to punt, all right?
Okay.
I'm not going to represent that I'm an expert on an ESOP. I don't have one. If I were to consider an ESOP in my law firm, frankly, I'd retain someone to advise me on it. So I know they exist, and basically, what you're contributing is stock to the employee as part of a pension.
And you have to then pay for the stock when the employee leaves.
Right. As part of a pension.
Sort of like they would have done it from a public company perspective.
Correct.
And the plan can borrow. The thing is, a trust fund has to be set up, so it gets quite costly. I've seen amounts that could be as high as $40,000. So it's not just something for a small business, but the concept is that you can then, when the employee leaves, they can then get the dollar value for those shares at that time, where evaluation has to be done, which is another thing that's part of that plan.
Yeah, true. But
right?
Yeah, but even for small businesses, there are simple plans. The more complicated plan, I mean, there are advantages and disadvantages to the complexity, but there's simple things that even a small business can do.
And with the ESOP, just to answer the question, is they buy the shares of the departing owner. That could be a concept. They could borrow money at a lower effective tax rate. They create an additional benefit to the employees. So these are some of the considerations. Contributions of stock or tax deductible, depending on the type of company you are as well. And I believe they're not available for partnerships, but they are available for S Corps and C Corps. And dividends are tax deductible in these plans. And of course, for S Corps, there's no tax on the corporate level. But when the withdrawals happen, as you said, with the retirement plans, even though you're accumulating wealth, later on, you're going to pay ordinary income tax on those distributions. So that's that question, or questions. We have a few more, and let me just see if I can pull those up. John, do you want to do the questions, or you would like me to?
Well, you can go through them, Doreen,
Okay.
but before you go
ahead.
before you go through them,
I think we should do the last word.
I had looked at some of the questions, and some of them are very specific to a particular person.
Okay.
You're going to receive an evaluation form. On that evaluation form, if your question is not answered today, please write on there your question, and SCORE will get back to you and answer your question one-on-one. Remember, SCORE, we're mentors. We don't charge for our service. Some of the things you're asking for is, if, for example, is there somebody that could do the valuation of my business without having to pay? Yes, there is. But in order to do that, I'd like to know where you're living and where you're located, et cetera, so we can give you the correct referrals, okay?
So John, I'm going to give
Yes.
them the fourth word, which is right behind you, SCORE. The
Okay.
fourth word, for those that are getting CE, requesting CE and CPE, the fourth word is SCORE. So just remind them that they have to put those words on their evaluation, John.
Yes, and the words that are going on the evaluation form, let's just clear it, are only for the ones that are asking for CE or CPE credits.
That's correct.
All of the other people who have signed up for this do not have to use those words. You will get an evaluation form on there. There'll be a place to say, please contact me, or have Bob contact you, or Doreen contact you, or SCORE contact you. There's no charge. Just understand that. We will try to get back to you and answer your question, because some of them are, very specific. Like,
I'm going to
what
bring
type
up
of
one, because we have some practitioners on, so I just want to make sure we answer those questions. The transferability of goodwill in the sale process. Can you just kind of touch on that a little bit about goodwill, Bob?
Well, yeah. I mean, goodwill is it's an intangible asset, right? So you can't really see it. It's how attractive, if you will, a business is to the larger community. It has goodwill. Been around for 40 years. People know this place. People use this place. When a business is sold, right? The price. Let's assume it's $1 million, right? The price, from a tax perspective, has to be apportioned among the different aspects of a business. How much of the price was for the physical assets? How much of the price is attributable to the covenant not to compete? How much of the price is attributable to the goodwill of the business, right? And how you apportion these things has to have some relationship to reality. I don't apportion them. I usually advise clients to speak to their, tax advisor once we've got the price of the sale. And let's talk about the apportionment of this. And the reason why it's important is because the deductibility from the buyer's perspective, right, and seller's perspective depends upon the nature of the apportionment and the nature of the tax. So, I mean, goodwill, if I'm not 100% sure of this, is why I would ask the accounts, but I think that's something that a seller can amortize over a period of years.
Right. So there's also, on the tax aspect side, there's personal goodwill outside of the business. That depends on a service type business. If your business might not rely on the product, but on the actual key person who's running that business that's connected with all the customers. If that could be proved, there's personal goodwill, which is outside of the business, that could be taxed at a capital gains rate versus what's in the business. And usually what the IRS looks like is if that owner employee signed a non-compete with its own company. If they did, then the personal goodwill, the goodwill goes to the business. If not, the personal goodwill it's a personal goodwill outside the business, taxed at a better rate. So you need to kind of like, plan for those areas as well when you are looking to transition in a closely held related party business or arm's length transaction. There's many court cases on that, but we won't go through that at this time.
Generally, what my experience on the apportionment aspects is that that's usually determined by the accountant for the seller and the buyer, because there's a yin and a yang to some of these things, if I'm not mistaken, Doreen. That is, you treat it one way that's good for the seller and bad for the buyer. You treat it another way that's good for the buyer and bad for the seller in terms of apportioning the price. And so from my perspective, what I try and facilitate is get the two accountants together, let them, they both know their financials, let them hash it out, or let them come up with the apportionment, and let me know as attorney what the how we're apportioning the price in the contract.
Right. Just something that we have to make sure that we look at.
It's a very good question. Something I guess I should have mentioned. Price should be apportioned.
With a business valuation, obviously you should have a formal business valuation if you're dealing with goodwill, I would think. You wouldn't want to use a free method because then if the IRS comes in later to do an examination, you need the facts and circumstances and the documentation to prove how you came up with the numbers. Some of the other questions here, let me just see if I can go. How is the sale of a business taxed? I think that's very general. There's different aspects to that, right? It depends on all those entities that you talked about, whether they're capital assets, whether they're ordinary income, whether it's a partnership. So you really can't answer that question. Do you pay capital gains on the sale of the business? That depends on if it's an asset sale. Generally, you have asset sales, right? When you deal with your businesses, you don't generally transfer the stock.
Generally, I mean, in terms of the business transactions that I handle, yes, the majority of them are what are called asset sales as opposed to equity sales. Although there are equity sales, and sometimes they're advantageous for a lot of reasons. What Doreen's basically talking about here, for those of you who don't know, it's that if I own a business, right, and it's a limited liability company, I can transfer my membership interest in the limited liability company to you, and you own that limited liability company and all its assets. That and its liabilities. Well, you may want to avoid the liabilities and just get the assets. Well, then I can't sell you my membership interest. I just sell you the assets, right? Just the assets of the business I sell you. That's an asset sale, not an equity sale. You're right, Doreen, I'd agree. Most of the transactions that you see here in a place like Staten Island would be asset sales, but equity sales do occur and sometimes are the smarter way to go.
Yes. And I had a question about somebody saying, if you start out at sweat equity, how do you get up to, that value in your business? And that you talked about that before. It's the history, the financials. You have to look 3 to 4 years back to establish the equity in the business. And also you would then incorporate the valuation with that at the time of sale. And again, is it arm's length or is it a family type, related party type sale? Someone had a question about an idle loan if you transfer it over. I mean, I don't know if that's your topic.
What was that? I'm sorry.
The idle economic injury disaster loan under, with the COVID-19 crisis, they have this loan and they want to sell their business. And since it's guaranteed by the current owners, you have to transfer it over. Can it be assigned to the new?
I would answer anything that you've personally guaranteed. Right? If you personally guarantee it, you transfer your business, you remain personally liable for it. There's no way you get out from under that liability unless the lender, in this case, the government, consents. But there are still ways around it. You transfer the business, you remain personally liable, but you get perhaps an indemnification from the new buyer. Listen, if the government ever comes after me for this, you got to agree to indemnify and hold me harmless from it.
I also think you have to get permission from the Small Business Administration on this one with the idles. I've read about that, and it seems like when you are looking to make a transfer, you need to let them know that this is going to happen.
Well, that could very well be.
Let's see. Recommendations on brokers and evaluators. We don't really do that, right? We're just talking about the topic.
Yeah.
Oh, the types of businesses someone should start with when they're starting a business. Is it better to start as a sole proprietor or a limited liability company?
From a pure legal perspective, it's better to start as a limited liability company for the reasons that I laid out in the charter. A, your liability is limited to your investment. You get perpetual existence. Yeah, you got some flexibility in management, etc. The only thing that countervails against forming a limited liability company is cost and expense of formation. You can get away cheap if you're a sole proprietor, but the better way to go.
You could be, like you said, you could be a limited liability company sole member. It's like being a sole proprietor, protected.
Sure.
Right?
One person can own a limited liability company. One person can own a corporation. If I'm asked as a lawyer, am I better off from a legal perspective being a sole proprietor or a single owner of a limited liability company? You're better off being a single owner of a limited liability company. That's a no-brainer type answer.
Yeah, but you also could wind up having a corporation to be a sub-S corporation and accomplish a lot of the same things.
It's
no doubt about it.
It's less expensive on a startup, John, but the problem is it gets more complex when you go to dissolve it as opposed to dissolving a sole member LLC in the New York area. So that's just one thing to think about.
Well, we have to keep in mind, there's two questions. The first question was sole proprietor or limited liability company. That one's easy, right, to me.
Yes.
Limited liability. The other one that John's proposing, limited liability company or sub-S corporation, there's a little more meat on that bone in terms of answering that question.
Yeah. There's another question with regards to closing their business, but it's a specific question about air transportation business. It has one LLC with an aircraft, and the business is close to bankruptcy due to pandemic.
That's probably a question they should send on the evaluation.
Want to do specific because it's asking about Chapter 11, Chapter 9. We did a presentation on that.
Right, that's too specific, and people are going to.
Okay, so you'll answer that or refer to that on their survey, right? So they should ask that on their survey?
Please, that would be best.
Okay, let's see. I want to make sure we didn't miss anybody.
There are some questions here, such as, do you need to get the return when you're figuring your price? Do you need to get the return over based on over 1 year, or can it be returned over 10 years? Maybe you can. Yeah.
So in other words, Bob, in planning your sale, first of all, they're talking about the multiple of calculating their EBITDA, which is a way they calculate on the valuation, quick and dirty. I don't think you get involved with that, and that's not a tax question. But I guess when they plan their sale, how do they develop the concept of their return? When you said you described, well, you could be paid by when you're transitioning out, you could be a consultant, right, as part of that sale. How many years should you consider when you're doing some of these installment methods, or when you're transitioning out as a seller from, it could be a service business, let's say?
Yeah, that's more of a business decision than it is a legal one. I mean, from a legal perspective, the longer you go out, right, the more chance that the longer you're exposed for a default, right? So generally, the sooner you get your money, the better from a legal perspective. But from a business perspective, you might not be able to keep it short. The buyer has certain considerations too, and you don't want to. I mean, think about it. If you're selling a business that throws off X amount of dollars a year, right, and you structure an installment sale that you got to ask yourself, how's the buyer going to be able to pay this? I know what he makes. This is going to choke him, this pay it out over 2 year thing. And so there you might have to, stretch it out some more. There's another factor. What interest rate you're getting? You're getting 15% interest. Not only do you don't mind dragging it out, but you might want to, you can't prepay it, right? If you're getting 2%, 1%, you might want to shorten the term. So there's different aspects in it. From
That's
a legal perspective,
yeah, that's part of the negotiation process.
Yeah. But from a legal perspective, shorter the better.
And I think that's all the questions, John. Do you see anything else here that we might have missed?
Yeah, I've answered a few directly.
Oh,
but-
okay, yes, there was one question about, does the buyer and the seller need to attach a form to their tax returns? And that is correct on their initial returns. When someone purchases a business, depending on what entity they're formed as, there is a form, there's an IRS form that has to get attached, and it divides the assets into different groups. So for that initial purchase, yes, you must attach a form to your return. And also for that business that's selling as well. There's an IRS form for that as well. And they also ask for the EIN numbers on both sides. And I think that covered all of the questions other than one or two specific ones regarding their case. Any other questions or comments? Because I think we hit 1 o'clock.
Timing wasn't bad.
No.
Okay. Well, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank everyone for participating. I want to especially thank Bob Scamardella. Bob, you did a terrific job. And Doreen, your input is valuable. So thank you so much, both of you, for being a part of this. The slides, as we mentioned earlier, will be sent to all the people who attended so that you could have them. And remember again that SCORE is available by phone, email, or Zoom to help answer the questions that came up from this seminar or any others that you might have. And as I said before, SCORE doesn't charge. We have mentors. We're not the consultants that are going to give you a tab to go and pay. Okay. Thank you all for participating. And with that, I bid you all good night.
Thank you, John.
Take care.
Be well. Be well.
Bye.